Hello people, John the Biker here and welcome to the channel. Today I'm going to be giving you my top 10 tips for new riders. Now these top 10 tips aren't only designed for new riders, anyone can use these tips obviously, but my focus was on new riders or maybe perhaps someone who's not ridden for a while, coming back to riding again. So let's get that done. So my first tip is protection. Now this is a very important thing you need to consider when you're going out riding a motorcycle, because as we all know, this can be extremely dangerous and inevitably we're going to come off at some point, I think. I go with the attitude that I haven't fallen off yet, but you know, it's going to happen. So what I've done and what I would advise anybody to do is to invest in proper gear. Now when you go your CBT, you'll be told that you must wear a helmet, which is obviously really good advice, but that's the only legal requirement for you. But what I suggest, or what I hope everybody does, and most people probably will, is they'll invest in more than just a helmet. I'm talking gloves, jacket, trousers, boots. There is literally hundreds, if not thousands, of retailers in the UK alone, but then obviously you've got the worldwide market as well. Now there is lots and lots of gear out there, and what I suggest you do before you buy anything is do a little bit of research on the item that you're thinking about. Now I tend to not buy any gear from, you know, Amazon and eBay. Not that I've got nothing against those retailers, of course. It's just that I would rather buy from a motorcycle shop. So the two that I tend to use here in Scotland is J&S in Hamilton. I believe they've got other stores throughout the country, and Sports Bike Shop. Now there's not a sports bike shop in Scotland itself, but they do mail order, and what I particularly like about both of those sites is you get reviews on all the items that you're looking at. Now when I first bought my first bike, on my 125, I probably spent more money on my equipment than on my bike, just simply because I thought if I'm ever going to come off and have an accident, I'm probably going to do it when I'm learning. So I spent slightly more on my gear. Now don't cheap out on gear, you know, especially your helmet. I guess, how much is your head worth? So make sure that you're buying quality items, make sure it's got some sort of safety rating, maybe sharp ratings or etc. But definitely look at your gear, especially your jacket and your trousers. Make sure that it's got CE approved armour and at least the shoulders and the elbows. You can get it in the back obviously. I personally don't particularly like the back protectors, even though I do wear one in this jacket I'm wearing just now. But the minimum has to be shoulders and elbows. Also make sure that the material that the jacket or the trousers that you're buying can withstand an impact, or if you unfortunately come off your bike, it's not going to tear, because if it tears, then obviously the next material that's going to come in contact, the ground's going to come in contact with, is your skin, and skin doesn't grow back that quickly. So make sure you're well protected on your jacket and your trousers, and equally so make sure that you invest properly in a pair of boots. Now when I first started riding, I just used my brown Timberland boots, which were fine, you know, they were sturdy enough, but they're quite expensive and they're not designed for motorbikes. So what I was finding was I was actually starting to ruin the toe area, especially on the left boot. So I invested in a proper pair of boots as well. I've actually got a few pairs of boots now that I own, and I wear them for when I'm out on the bike. Obviously I'm looking at things like keeping my feet warm and dry, and obviously with some sort of protection on them. Now I will be doing a review on all the equipment that I bought, but I don't want to go into too much about it just now. And then lastly, your hands. So invest in a good pair of gloves, at least one good pair of gloves. Now again, I've got a few pairs of gloves now. I've got ones for colder weather, summer weather, and kind of in between weather. The ones I'm wearing just now are my Oxford, I forget the actual name of these gloves, but they're made by Oxford, and these are my warm weather gloves, because as you can see the weather's not particularly nice just now, and it is fairly cold. And like I says, with everything, don't cheap out on your gear. Make sure you're buying good equipment, because at the end of the day this is the stuff that's going to save you. So that's my first top tip, is protection. Make sure you protect yourself. So top tip number 2 is knowing your limits. Now what I mean by knowing your limits is your actual own personal limits and the limits of your motorcycle. Now what happens if you've just passed your CVT, you'll be going along and you'll probably be taking it nice and easy to begin with, but as you gain experience, what happens is it breeds complacency, and you'll start to forget things. You'll start to forget to do your blind spot checks and things like that. So just keep in mind that you've got limits. If you're out with your friends and they're on bikes, maybe they've been riding a lot longer than you, they're going to be doing things that you can't do. You'll be able to do it eventually, but straight away you're not going to be able to do it. You're not going to know what to do in certain situations, and that never leaves, I don't think. I've been riding for a little while now, and even me, I sometimes have to tell myself off for doing silly things, especially if I'm riding in a group. I just get carried away. I start to get complacent, not thinking of the consequences of what I'm actually doing. So know your own limits, and don't just give in to peer pressure. If you see your friends doing things, doesn't mean you necessarily should be doing them. And then I say, knowing the limits of your bike. Now, if you've just passed your CVT, you're on a 125, and if you were like me, I had lots of friends who rode motorcycles, and they were all on bigger bikes, and like a twat, I tried to keep up with them a lot of the time, and my bike just wasn't capable of it. So I had to know my limits of what that bike could do. It certainly wasn't going to win any races against them, so I had to keep dialing myself back, and making sure that I was driving within my limits. Also, when you do move to a bigger bike, you've got a little bit of a learning curve going from the 125 to your new bigger bike. Now, you'll have driven one during your lessons, on your test, etc., but you've always had that safety net of an instructor behind you, talking to you in your ear, keeping you right. Well, now you don't have that. You're on your own, and depending on what kind of bike you buy will depend on what that bike's going to be able to do. Now, my bike, this one here for instance, is a Honda CB500X, and it's kind of like a light tourer, I guess. Now this bike, where it is nippy enough, it's fairly fast. If I go out with my friends and they're all on their bigger bikes, a lot bigger than this one, then I'm not going to be able to keep up with them, so I need to remind myself of that. So just bear that in mind when you're out and about riding your bike. Know your limits. So top tip number 3, avoid distractions. So what I mean by avoiding distractions is just making sure that there's nothing going to be taking your attention off the road and what you're actually meant to be doing. Now, I've seen lots and lots of videos on YouTube and other places, and even riders out on the road when I've been out and about, and their bike is just cluttered with lots of distractions. Now, what I mean by distractions on the handlebars is things like GPSs and, you know, all these little gizmos that tell them their tyre pressures and blah blah blah. Now, I know I'm kind of contradicting myself. I do have a phone attached to my handlebars, but as you can see, it's kind of out the way. It doesn't interfere with anything, and when I'm actually driving along, I can't actually see the phone. I do have a set of heated grips on this bike, but again, once I get on the bike and I'm actually driving my normal riding position, I can't actually see it that well. So I'm not distracting myself by any blinking lights or anything like that. But also, I think to be aware of with distractions is things happening at the side of the road. So we've all seen rubberneckers, and that's where something's happening at the side of the road and everybody slows down to have a good look. So you want to try and limit the amount of things that are distracting you from actually driving on the road. So top tip number 4 is, again, it's kind of like a contradiction for what I just said, is getting the big picture, or building up a big picture. So as you're driving along, or riding along, sorry, you should be constantly scanning the road ahead, looking for any kind of hazards, any kind of obstacles that you're going to have to negotiate. Now, looking here, I can see there's parked cars on the left, and I've got a couple of cyclists up ahead, and obviously I've got these couple of cars in front of me as well. So as I'm driving along, I'm building a picture of what's happening in front of me, and what I'm aiming for is so that nothing surprises me. I don't want anything to pull out in front of me, etc. And it gives me more time to actually negotiate all these hazards, especially the cyclists in front, because we don't know what they're going to do. So by spotting them nice and early, I'm not going to forget about them, and I'm going to be able to deal with that situation when I get to it. So building the big picture is also spotting junctions ahead, maybe side roads coming off from the left and the right, and maybe there's cars parked there, etc. So that's building the big picture, and that was top tip number 4. So top tip number 5, never stop learning. So whenever we're out riding our motorcycles, you should always be prepared to learn something. Every day is a school day, as they say. Now, when I'm not riding motorcycles, I'm actually a driving instructor. I teach people how to drive large commercial vehicles. So I'm very aware that every day you need to learn something, or you should be prepared to learn something. If you go out there with the attitude that you know everything, then you're going to be in trouble, because you're not going to adapt your riding style when you come up to something unexpected. But if you're prepared to learn and do something different, then you're going to be a lot better. So top tip number 5 is never stop learning. So top tip number 6 is being in the right mind. Now again, what I just told you, with my actual job, I'm very aware that people who don't drive in the right mind tend to have accidents. So make sure before you go out riding your motorcycle that you're in the right mind. Now sometimes it's unavoidable and we have to drive or ride, and you may already be in a bad mood or something like that, but what you should be preparing for is putting all those emotions to the side, making sure you're going out in a good mood, or not in a bad mood. Maybe you just had an argument with someone or something bad's happened. That's going to affect the way that you ride. So make sure that you're in the right mind before driving, because you can get easily be distracted by not being in the right mind. And if you're distracted, like we already discussed, then potentially something bad could happen. So top tip, be in the right mind. So top tip number 7 is watching out for the weather. Now, as you can see, the weather isn't particularly good today here, but up here in Scotland, if all you want to do is ride in the sunshine, you're not going to get much riding done. So unfortunately, I just need to take the good with the bad. But what I actually mean by watching the weather is how quickly it can change. And this can affect the way you ride your motorcycle. It can affect how the motorcycle reacts on the road. So keeping an eye out on the weather can prepare you for that. So it's like building the big picture again. So I don't want anything to surprise me. Now I've been out a few times and I've been caught out in the rain, and once or twice even snow. But I've always been relatively prepared for it. Like I said, here in Scotland you can get 4 seasons in one day anyway. But if it starts to rain or snow, or it gets particularly cold, on the motorcycle you're going to get even colder. And this can obviously lead to you being distracted, because you're more concentrating on how cold it is, etc. And obviously, if your motorcycle if you've been riding your motorcycle in nice sunny weather and then suddenly it starts raining, then the roads can turn that greasy way. Hopefully you've not had too much of it, but I'm sure you've all heard of the roads going greasy. So top tip number 7 is watching out for the weather and being prepared for it. So top tip number 8, yeah, we're almost at the end. Top tip number 8 is look twice. Now again, this probably comes from my driving instructor profession, but I always tend to look twice. At every roundabout, at every junction, you can see that it's clear, but taking that second look could be the difference between you making that junction and you getting knocked off your motorcycle. Now, I'm sure you've all seen other riders or car drivers. The car drivers especially can go round the roundabouts and they don't really drop off their speed. So at first you think that car's far away, and then as soon as you go to pull out, that car is right beside you. By looking twice, you're going to get a gauge of how fast that car is, or that other motorcycle is riding. So by looking twice you can avoid a whole load of injuries. So top tip number 8 is look twice. So top tip number 9 is checking your bike. Now on your CBT you're taught how to check your bike for the minimum things that you need to look for, and you may have heard the acronym BOLTS, and that's one that I use every day, is BOLTS. So this is things that I'm going to check on my bike to make sure it's roadworthy and make sure that nothing sinister might happen. Now, in case you've forgotten, I'll remind you what BOLT stands for. So B is for brakes. So make sure we're checking our brakes daily to make sure that they are going to stop us when we need them to stop us. O is for oil. So before I turn my bike on, I make sure it's level, and I check my oil level just to make sure I've got enough oil in it. And I even check the dipstick, if you have a dipstick on your bike, to make sure that the oil is in good condition. L is for lights. So turn all your lights on, indicators, and test your brake lights as well, just to make sure that they're all functional and that they're not broken. T is for tyres. So check the condition of your tyres, checking for the tyre tread all round the tyre. I've seen lots of people just checking little bits of the tyre. It has to be all round the tyre. And S is for suspension. Just make sure your suspension is working properly and that it's going to do the job that it's designed to do. So top tip number 9 is check your bike. Make sure that it is roadworthy. Now last but not least, top tip number 10, and that's to have fun. Now this is probably the most important thing in my opinion. When you're riding your motorcycle, it should be fun. If it's not fun, then what's the point, right? Now maybe you're just riding your bike to work and you're only using it for an hour a day, but it should still be fun. If you're not having fun, you're going to get bored. If you get bored, you're going to get distracted. If you get distracted, you're not going to look out for things. So make sure you're having fun, guys. If you're not having fun, there's no point. So top tip number 10, have fun. So if you've stuck around until the end, thanks very much. Just remember that these 10 top tips are just my personal opinions. I'm sure there's hundreds of other tips that you could probably have, and I suggest that you look at them all if you get the chance. But these are just the ones that I found helped me a lot when I was riding, learning to ride. So if you've not subscribed already, please do, and if you like the video, please let me know. Any comments, please let me know that as well, and I'll try my best to answer them. Now my next video is going to be the review on the Honda CB500X, and I'm also going to be doing the chain and sprocket on this bike. They're getting a bit worn, so that's the next 2 videos coming up, the review and the chain and sprocket change. So once again, thanks very much for watching, and ride safe.